I know you have very busy lives and busy jobs. So this is the business board reconvening after the election. Can I just remind colleagues that we are in Purda and this is live streamed, so it is in public. So if Ben starts throwing his arms around, it's because somebody said something they shouldn't. But let's start the meeting. So James, can you tell us when you're online?
Well, we are now.
Well, super, thank you. It's a good job I didn't say anything rude. Marvellous. Before we start, can I say this is probably the last meeting for Tom Reardon, who has served West Yorkshire and Leeds in particular with absolute integrity and delivery, and Yorkshire Forward. Oh, did I say it? Yorkshire Forward? And Yorkshire Forward and the work he's done at Leeds has just been incredible. So I want to thank you personally, Tom, for your work. Thank you. So yes, we are reconvening after the election. I am incredibly humbled and proud to be back. I think the first 3 years we were laying the groundwork, and now my message to the whole organisation and partners working collectively is deliver, deliver, deliver. We have a job of work to do, and we're going to get it done. So whether that's the 5,000 affordable homes, you know, we brought buses back into public control, so we'll be delivering a bus network that's locally controlled. We'll have spades in the ground on mass transit. We're going to become a region of learning and creativity with modular learning for our workforce and for citizens, to make sure that everybody has access to the great opportunities. We're going to be investing in our businesses. We haven't taken our foot off the gas, the green gas, with the climate and emergency targets that we have, net zero by 2038. That's going to be incredibly challenging, but we can get there with the support of businesses like yourselves. And a local growth plan, which I know that you've been, some of you have been part of and contributing to, when that was the economic strategy that is now the growth plan, because we need to grow our economy. And finally, just such a privilege to be the West Yorkshire Mayor when there are now more mayors in the country. I am pleased to lose the moniker that I'm the only female Metro Mayor in the country. Where there were more mayors called Andy than women mayors. And now we have the amazing Kim McGuinness in the North East and Claire Ward for East Midlands. And working with David Skaith, who I'm really delighted that he got over the line in York and North Yorkshire, and also with Oliver Coppard in South Yorkshire, being able to have that sort of strong Yorkshire identity. And any minute now we're going to have a mayor in East Riding and Hull. And then we will have 4 mayors in Yorkshire. And just imagine the global impact of our brand as 4 mayors working together with business, supporting business going forward. So in the pre-election period, obviously, things are slightly on hold. We're campaigning, and the election is only a few weeks away. But post-election, I hope that in the conversations that we've had, you are aware of my determination to bring deeper devolution to West Yorkshire. We were the ones that negotiated the level 4 next step to the single settlement, so mayors across the country can draw down from that framework the things that they think they are ready and mature enough to move on to. So deeper devolution, I think, is going to be very exciting, particularly around skills, where we'll be able to be more agile and to get better outcomes with the money. And I have to say, West Yorkshire has been on fire recently with UK Reef, 12,000 people coming to Leeds. I attended Climb 24, bringing those investors from all over the country to meet our businesses. And I'm sure you'll hear more from Mandy rather. Andy's on the brain. From Mandy going forward. So I'm delighted to be here again as your mayor, and very excited for the future. I met with the Mayor's Council a couple of days ago, those big businesses. It's in the papers, you'll have seen the attendee list. And I do believe the Mayor's Council and the Business Board working in lockstep for the people of West Yorkshire is actually a game changer. and very unique. And I don't think every mayor has this opportunity. So that's the foreword from me. Thank you very much. I'm sure most of you know housekeeping, bathrooms, etc. But where to go and so on. We are live, so if you feel you need a drink or you need to take a break, please just do get up and do that. So over to our chair, Mandy Ridyard. Now, whilst we haven't made the formal decision that Mandy continues as the chair of the business board, we will be ratifying that at the next CA. But as my appointment, Mandy will continue as the chair of the business board and will chair this meeting from now on in. So thank you all so much, and over to you, Mandy.
Thank you, and thanks for the confidence to suggest that I am reappointed. I love working with you, and it was fantastic to see that in this region we had the biggest swing of all mayors in the recent election. So, all kudos to our mayor for pulling that off. I think that not only does that give us a great sort of platform to move forward on for the next 4 years, but also the work that we're doing on our regional growth plan and the other stuff that we're doing around the business board will also start to augment the brilliant work we've done already. And I think you feel that when you go to events. So Tracy mentioned UK Reef, the biggest event in the UK for infrastructure and investment. And when we were at that event, our pavilion, I was going to call it a tent, but it was a pavilion, was absolutely buzzing. There was some brilliant work done by officers here in pulling that together. There was a fantastic interactive map. We had lots of people from this board presenting at that event and a real buzz in the air. And I think it was fantastic when I sat next to somebody on the water taxi who I didn't know. And I did go on the water taxi 6 times in one day, so it's a fantastic service if you do need to get to the armories. But we're sitting on that, hearing somebody say that West Yorkshire or Leeds particularly really is the best place to be at the moment. There's so much going on and so much opportunity. I think that was actually brilliant when you hear that anecdotal information from a complete stranger who was from London and not from here. So great news. That was followed up by a week later, back down to the armories again. Water taxis were back on again. Climb 24 with 2,000 investors and businesses there. We've made some fantastic contacts at both of those events, and at Climb 24, the investor summit that we went to in the evening and followed up in the previous day has given us some opportunity to really connect our businesses with investment and also showcase what we've got in this region. And I know that James Mason and I both sat on a podcast around innovation, and a number of people around this table also sat on different panels. So well done to everybody for again bringing the biggest event in the UK for investment to this region. And hopefully we'll have both of those again next year. I think Reef have already signed up. So that's fantastic. The Armories doesn't stop there. This week, 2 days, we've got the biggest UK space event, Ignite Space, back down at the Armories, where we're hosting about 1,000 people talking about space in our region. And who would have thought 4 or 5 years ago that Yorkshire would be a destination for space? And again, at that event, there are lots of business exhibiting. There's lots of really cool stuff going on. But talking about investment, we've had conversations around inward investment at that meeting, which start to really underpin why West Yorkshire is a place to come and look at when you want opportunity. Good news, King's Awards winners. We have a handful of them in the region, and we will be celebrating that with all of them very soon. I can't wait to go around those businesses and talk to them about how well they've done, but also to unlock how they did that. And I know that the chambers are running events for businesses in this region around how to get a King's Award. And we know we've got the talent here and the businesses here that can win those prestigious awards. And we want to make sure that next year we get more of them than we have done this year. Because putting West Yorkshire on the map through all of these things, events, through winning awards and through doing the substance, the work that goes on, especially in this building with everybody's help, is really important to delivering the economic prosperity that we all want. To help everyone in the room, some of the team, including myself, have been working on this, which you have in front of you. So one of the things that I was keen on when we got here was an elevator pitch. So when we're all out doing our role, representing our businesses or in representing the region in our networks, that we've got some important information to really start to talk about what we're great at and why West Yorkshire is the place to come. So this is a first attempt. It was done quite quickly in about a week or two. So we'd really welcome all your comments on how to improve this. So it's meant to fit in your pocket or your wallet or your man bag, whatever you've got, but it's there to help you talk to other people about why they should be growing their business or starting their business or moving their business to this region. So I really hope you find it helpful. I know that I do. And we would really welcome any feedback on that. So please talk to me or talk to members of the team about what we can do. And when we're talking about members of the team, it's fantastic to have full representation from both chambers, from the FSB and from the CBI at this event. And so I'm really glad that you're on board. I think you have an important role to play and can really help us talk to more and more businesses more effectively. And that is engagement is critical to what we deliver. And Julie, who sat over there very quietly, has now been appointed to help support this team, including myself. And so she's a first point of contact for anybody who wants to know anything about what's going on. It's been a little bit quiet over the last couple of months, but now we've got all the ingredients in place to really make a difference. And to that point, after we've gone through this meeting, and we hope to get it done by 4 o'clock, there will be a workshop on some more really important information that we've got coming out around stuff that's informing the economic strategy. So you may like to stay to that. I'd love it if you did. So I don't think I've missed anything. If I have, please put your hand up and let me know. I'm not perfect, but I'd like to start with the formal part of this meeting. So the apologies for absence. So James, can I ask you to let me know who's already given their apologies, please?
Okay, we have apologies from councillors Susan Hinchcliffe, Jane Scullion, who's represented by Councillor Scott Patient, Councillor Kathy Scott, and Councillor Michael Graham. We have apologies from the private sector representatives Jane Atkinson, Nikki Chance-Thompson, Shirley Congdon, Aaron Holt, Asma Iqbal, and Lisa Johnson.
Thank you very much, Jane. That's great, that's noted. So next on the agenda is declaration of interests. Has anybody got anything that they need to declare? No, brilliant, we'll move on. And then number 5, exempt information. I don't believe there is anything that needs to be excluded from the press or public. James, is that right?
Yeah.
Lovely, thank you very much. You will see in the pack that you had the minutes of the meeting that we held on the 20th of February, the last meeting of this business board. I'd like to sign those off unless anybody has anything that they'd like to change or add. Nope, that's brilliant. I'll sign those off and pass them to you now. Thank you very much, James. So item 7, governance arrangements. This is a little bit dry, but it's very important. So following on from the mayoral elections, I'm going to ask Felix to cover the governance arrangements for the West Yorkshire Business Board. So over to you, Felix.
Thank you, Chair. I'll try to make it a bit more wet. The paper you've got sets out arrangements for the year ahead. There are some formal things that we need to do, linking this board to the rest of the combined authority and its architecture. The paper tries to do a few things. I'm not proposing to go through everything because I'm taking it as read. But you'll see in the paper we set out the process for appointing members from here to the various boards and committees and ad hoc groups that from time to time we will have to do. And the paper then goes on to set out the first few that we have to do and we are ready to do now. But as the year goes on, there will be more to be done, and paragraph 2.1 sets out how that will be done. So the first thing is, as the Mayor said during her comments, to note the nomination of Mandy Rudyard as the CA member, appointed from here to the CA board with voting rights. Mandy's substitute will be Asma Iqbal, who can't be with us today, but she, in her role as the deputy chair of this board, will be the sub for Mandy. Secondly, the paper seeks your approval for us to nominate board members to committees of the CA as deputy chairs to the various thematic committees in line with the table of nominations in the appendix of this report. So you will see in that relevant appendix that we've identified the nominees from here to go to the thematic committees that the Combined Authority has. One thing to note is that when the Combined Authority Board meets later this month, there is a paper going in about merging the business committee with the skills committee. So because that has not been done yet, the nominations that you've got are as they stand right now. When that happens, we will go through the process. There will be a nominee, and we will come back to this group. But it's worth just noting that the members that have been nominated from here to the various thematic groups are for the Business, Economy and Innovation Committee. Sorry, Becky. Okay. Currently, Asma Iqbal is the nominee to that committee. For climate, we have Jane Atkinson from Infinium representing this committee. For the culture committee, we have Nikki Chance Thompson as the deputy chair and Cameron Rashid as a member from here. For employment and skills, we have Shirley Condon, who is not here today. And for the place committee, we have Annette Joseph, who is our nominee from here. Asma Iqbal is also being nominated to join the Finance, Resources and Corporate Committee from here to represent you. So the job for the committee is to note that, and if you are minded to approve those nominations, to then go to the Combined Authority Board for approval. The next thing is to note that we are nominating a member from here to the TFN board. The Transport for the North board requires members, the various combined authorities, to have members to sit on the board to represent our interests. Mandy will represent the board at that board, and her substitute will be Natalie Sykes. So when Mandy is unable to, for whatever reason, Natalie will represent us there. I think that sets out all the main ones that we are talking about today. There are other committees that we will be coming back to you on, as set out in paragraph 2.1, where we will be seeking representatives to Northern Gridstone and other such organizations that we work with, and we'll go through that process to nominate them. So I hope all of that is in order, and if the board is minded to, we will take those nominations through to the Combined Authority.
That's Martin and then Becky.
Hi, sorry, can I just ask a question, Felix? This is my first meeting now, probably clear to everyone else. But you say that the nominations have been made. Who's made the nominations? Is it from this committee, or is this... Yeah, it's just understanding who made the nominations.
Yes. So as we've set out in paragraph 2.1, the nominations, some of the nominations are set out in our constitution. So to go from the nominee from here to the CA board is the chair, and the deputy chair is the sub from there. Nominees to the other committees are the nominees that have been in place the other side of the election. So we've not really made any changes there. And we went through a process, had conversations with colleagues around the table about people's interests and strengths and preferences. and the chair, in consultation with the mayor, made those nominations. People went on to that, and we are reconfirming that. As and when there's a vacancy.
If I may also say, it's out of interest. So if you were to say to the chair, I'm really, really interested in the economy or in culture, then of course there's considerations, and I mean, it's a very free-flowing conversation and relationship.
Yeah.
Becky.
Oh, just a quick one. Is there any sort of boards that you worried are underrepresented, and can we help? And secondly, I couldn't see anybody from the FE sector on the skills, or obviously I think you're considering combining the two. And again, is that anything that, you know, the contacts in the room we can help with?
Becky, I think that's a really good point, and we will take that away and review it, and maybe come back to you if and to others if that's something that we need to take forward. If that's okay with everyone around this table. Before I come to you, Barney, can Felix respond to that?
So the nominee from here to the Skills Committee is Professor Shirley Condon from HE. The Skills Committee itself has representation from FE and from other independent training providers. This paper only sets out the private sector members that are on there. It doesn't set out the full representation on the full membership of the committee. It's not what we've set out here. It's just the private sector members.
That's really helpful, Felix. Thank you. Barney.
Yeah, I think it could be quite a daunting thing to go along to committees and be the voice of the private sector, because it's so vast and so many different voices. And it might not be something to answer today, but I wonder what consideration has been given to supporting those people who take up these roles, both in ensuring that they're comfortable in what they're doing, but also helping them get a rounded view of what businesses are thinking, saying, feeling.
Thank you, Barney. We'll take that back and see what more we can do. All members around the table went through an induction process. If you've not had that, if we've missed you for whatever reason, please shout, and we'll make the arrangements to make sure you have the benefits of that. Secondly, on these committees, there are several other private sector members for each committee, so you're not a lone voice when you're around that table, but we completely take the point, and whatever further support will be necessary, we'll make sure that is forthcoming.
It is a minor point and just an observation. Just on the Culture, Heritage and Sport Committee, you'd expect me to say this, but sport is one of the big drivers in the region, and it's great to see Bolu representing both East Byley grassroots community sports and also as a professional rugby player himself. But have we had any success with the professional sports clubs? I know that's always a challenge, trying to get them to engage, but had Leeds made the Premier League, that would have immediately made West Yorkshire global again. But it's just a question, and can we help again as contacts within the room to push that agenda? I know sometimes they say it's important to them, but whether they come to these meetings or not, I don't know. Maybe we can help.
Thank you. Well, that sounds glorious. Get some football players around the table. I don't know. Just to let you know that Yorkshire Sport are there, and so it's wider sort of intake. But also, I have been very aware of the last 3 years that we focused very intently on culture because of our years of culture, and I've now said to the team that the focus, in alignment with the commitment to become a region of learning, where every child has access to grassroots sports and creativity, that sport and also music are going to be now our targets. But there's always opportunities to refresh boards. So if you've got any contacts, James, that you think I need to meet, well, I'm very happy to meet them.
Right.
But of course, if you have football, then you have to have rugby, and then if you have rugby, you need to have cricket, and then netball and ping pong, and it goes on.
As a former Welsh netball player, I do feel like I do have a very keen interest in sport. But can I remind you, this is not only a pre-election period, it's a post-premiership period. So we just do need to be mindful of that. So anyway, so is everybody else happy with the arrangements? Everybody, no other comments? Great, I think we can take that as approved. So moving on to section 8, a forward look for the West Yorkshire Business Board. So I think we've talked really about the skeleton of the board, you know, who's doing what, but then what is it that we're going to do and how's that going to work? And I think because we're in a post-let period and we're now designing this around a new way of working, which is really exciting, I think I'm keen to make sure that we've met once in our new form, but we're clear about our role and our remit and our relationship to those thematic committees and the combined authority. So Sarah Bowes is going to talk us through some of the work that's already been done and give us a starter for 10 on where we go next. So Sarah, over to you, please.
Thank you, and Peter's going to control the slides for me, please. So this is really a chance, as Mandy said, to look at the role of the West Yorkshire Business Board, but also particularly look at the next 12 months and what we're going to be doing over the next 12 months. A real chance to shape the activity of this board as a collective. Next slide, please. Thank you. So just to quickly recap, and these slides were shared in advance, but just quickly recap about what the purpose of the West Yorkshire Board is, just so we're kind of all on the same page. It's really important that we've got that strong private sector voice and that strong private sector relationship to help us deliver all the activities and all the ambitions that are set out in the West Yorkshire Plan and the emerging local growth plan. We really want to strengthen that public-private engagement and ensure the voice of businesses are heard across a range of our CA activity, not just the business, business-specific issues, but the range of CA activity. And we've talked about the importance of working across the thematic committees and understanding the relationship between the West Yorkshire Business Board and the thematic committees. And also the role of this board as ambassadors and champions for West Yorkshire. And this is one of the opportunities for us all to kind of get the right messages and the same messages and speak the same language about West Yorkshire and the opportunities in West Yorkshire. And then there's a real opportunity for us all to act as advocates and visible leaders and utilising our own network. So this is a small group of people, but use our own networks to kind of reach out further and get broader opportunities and broader input. Next slide, please. So we've talked in the last meeting and previously in several of the meetings before that we will meet mostly in private to allow that depth of discussion and real insights into some of the business challenges and business voices into some of the things that we're looking at progressing as a combined authority. We've talked about making sure that the relationship between this board and the committees is there in terms of what we talked about previously, membership and key people, but also reports taken back and forth between different committees. This business board will really be a forum for providing that thought leadership on a range of regional issues, a range of business issues, a range of issues that are facing kind of the businesses across the region and those diverse businesses across the region, across different parts of the region. And it'll also provide a key route for commissioning research to support activities. So pulling in expert speakers, pulling in academics, pulling in whoever we think we need to pull in to have really deep conversations and get to some of the issues that we've got. Next slide, please. So this is just a slide that sets out the thematic committees. We've really gone through this in the previous paper, but it just sets out where the combined authority board is, where this board is, the Mayor's Council sit, and the actual thematic committees that sit underneath them. Next slide, please. So these are the dates of all the meetings. So we've had a private meeting, this is our formal AGM, and we're going to have a series of private meetings over the next 12 months. And in 12 months' time, then we'll have the formal AGM. And at that point, reporting back on all the activities and all the action that the board has been involved in over the last 12 months. So this is our chance to shape what we're going to do over the next 12 months. Next slide, please. So just briefly about the Mayor's Business Advisor role. So, Mandy's role is to provide advice to the Mayor and the Combined Authority, to work with the Mayor and the Combined Authority to promote West Yorkshire, to support the development of key regional strategies, obviously chair this meeting and ensure that those public-private relationships are strengthened, and support and champion West Yorkshire and be a kind of a key figurehead in that kind of business space. Next slide, please. So, progress since the first West Yorkshire Business Board, the first formal West Yorkshire Business Board, which was just in February. So we've done quite a lot of comms and marketing to raise the profile of the board and the members of the board particularly, and there was an op-ed in the Yorkshire Post which we shared around colleagues, which was really kind of amplifying the role of the board and the importance of the board. We've got a series of monthly comms planned out to celebrate West Yorkshire and West Yorkshire businesses, to really amplify, what's great about West Yorkshire and all those business opportunities. We've got things like this Z card in production, and it's open for improvements, and various other key message packs that we want to share and make sure we've kind of got those right messages across everybody who's talking to, whether it's investors, whether it's government, whether it's internationally. We're all saying the same thing about West Yorkshire. And we've got a private sector session planned in early July to talk about the local growth plan and mass transit consultation, and really make sure that we've got the voice of the private sector as part of those. Next slide, please. So, next 12 months. So we've got a couple of things. We've just had UK Reef and Climb. We're going to have them again. So we're going to be planning how we kind of maximise the opportunities at both those events next year. Continued shaping of key messages for West Yorkshire, more monthly comms, more opportunities to raise the profile of businesses and the board itself. More engaging with some of those enablers of innovation, universities, investors and professional services, to identify how we can raise the profile and maximise the opportunities in West Yorkshire, and really take on that kind of ecosystem and system enabling role to support the growth of West Yorkshire. We're really keen that the board has a really strong voice in several of the things that we've set out there. So shaping the development of our investable propositions and offer to investors, the business support review and the business engagement review, which is going to be a session later on today, the review of the skills landscape, review of access to finance, the gaps in provision and where as a combined authority and our partners we might want to intervene, mass transit, bus reform, better homes hub, and various other things. Next slide, please. We want input and the board to get really engaged in the sector and cluster development plans, and that's a real key focus of the local growth planners emerging around emerging tech, advanced manufacturing, green economy and creative industries. The investment zone is obviously a huge opportunity. Making sure we've got those deep dives in place around some of those really specific issues, particularly on critical infrastructure projects. Digital blueprint, climate plan, local transport plan, all those things we really want to make sure we're getting that business input on this board particularly. And it doesn't have to be in these formal meetings or even the informal meetings, it can be different kind of mechanisms to do that. Next slide, please. That's the last slide. So this is a real opportunity to help to shape what this board should be doing and should be looking at over the next 12 months. We've got the local growth plan later on the agenda, but it's really open to kind of discussion and thoughts about how we've got Mandy, how we utilise the business board members more effectively, how we use the board itself, and how we really make sure it's got a really strong voice at the table.
Thanks, Sarah. That's great, and hopefully everybody's had a chance to have a think about that when they read through the pack. So this is a team sport. This is not about me or about any of us on this board. It's about all of business in West Yorkshire, and we're here to be the voice of that business. And whether that is, we want to make West Yorkshire the best place to start a business, to grow a business, to move a business to, and to make sure that we do that inclusively. And that is our number one remit. So what we can do as a board by leveraging our networks, working with the committees, is start to really feed into policy that is here and start to help us, help businesses help businesses to increase their productivity, to be a place for inward investment, but also to help the public sector pull the levers that help all of those things happen too. So it's really important that it's not just us, that we're leveraging our networks and finding out more, which is why it's great to have everyone around this table. It's everybody's brains, not just one person's brains. And it's everybody's thoughts and exposures to all the different lived experiences that you all have. So we're keen to do that, but I'm keen to hear from you. What are your thoughts about this? Have we got any comments? Farah.
Trying to say, I think that I have got a couple of ideas. I think, on the economic strategy, the local growth plan, I think there needs to be an element of the industrial strategy that should really be part of that. I think that's probably missing. So if you spoke to manufacturers, they might sort of say, well, can we have a little bit more input into that? I think there is a vehicle for that. We've got the Manufacturing Advisory Board, which sort of the conglomerate of people are coming together with one voice in this, what we call the one voice, which will emerge as a leadership there, and hopefully that will feed into policy. So I think, I can understand why it's not being done, because there wasn't that sort of clear leadership there. We met. It's a great board. It's it has really great engagement from a range of stakeholders, but it needs to now begin to feed into the local sort of strategy as well as the national strategy as well, and that really is developing and emerging. So I'd be delighted to sort of be part of that and continue for the other members of that board to be part of that discussion as well. So that's sort of quite key. There's a lot happening. I mean, there's a lot happening, but that's the way that we can sort of support the work that's being done at that level.
Thanks, Farah. One thing that just on the next 12 months, I wonder whether what might be missing is just a focus on how we help people exporting. I know that James is doing a lot of work around this on trade missions and so on. How do we help you and our businesses do more? What levers, if there's a change of government, can we pull to draw a spotlight to our region as a brilliant home of export? So just wondering whether that's something that we could focus on. And also the clustering. There is definitely an appetite if we do get a Labour government for clustering to be a priority. So if we can identify our clusters, we've sort of done the work for government. We can just say, we're going to go ahead with this anyway, but come and invest, come and support us to deliver. Just a couple of thoughts on the look ahead for the board.
Thank you, Tracy. Tom.
Thanks, Chair. I thought it was a really good programme, and I just having a bit of, that experience of the interface between the public and the private sectors is not an easy one to get right, because they are quite different cultures at times, and I think this board is a great opportunity to really strengthen that relationship. And on the communication, the personal element of both of you actually, I think would be really, if you're sending monthly comms out, I would make sure it's if you get a corporate thing that says West Yorkshire and Combined Authority in Business or Leeds City Council in Business, it's much less likely to resonate, I think, than that sort of personal profile that you've got, Tracy, particularly. But I think that partnership with business, with Mandy, could really make a difference. We've used that quite a lot in Leeds, and I think it's been really successful. That people often remark about, oh, it's good to get your update about things, and I wouldn't just stick to, slavishly to the CA agenda, just wider perspectives on things, news about what's happening, all that stuff. I know you know all that, but I'm just, I think it's worth saying. And less is more sometimes with that stuff as well, where, I always try and get the team to cut things back so that people will actually read them. On the groups, I wonder as well about, there's some great, I affectionately call them the property lot. We need to really engage on their terms at times. So James has got the property forum, we've got the CBI Regional Council, there's good subgroups in the smaller businesses from colleagues around the table. So going out to them, as well as them coming to our sort of committees, I'd really recommend. It always helps just turning up and listening to them and letting them shout at you sometimes. Never happened here, I'm sure, but it did happen to me in the past. But it always makes people feel better and feel part of the ownership of what's going on. And then the final one was really your point, Tracy, about that I didn't really see the global bit on the work programme, and this is I think particularly post-Brexit, we've got to have that global perspective, and a lot of the businesses bring that. They've got these global links already, and I think they'd be willing to be, more ambassadorial, and it's great we've got UK Reef and Climb here, but there's other global events that are happening, and sometimes it doesn't need to be the CA or the councils at them, it can be the private sector at them banging the drum for us. So that and the national, even the northern, I think will still stay quite significant. So just having a sort of team effort on all of that, I think would be a good thing for the team to maybe think about.
Thank you, Tom, and I couldn't agree more. When we picked up on the growth plan early this morning, that international piece is something we really need to maximise. And as an exporter myself, an export champion, it's something that I'm really passionate about, and I know that the Chambers and others work hard on that for us. But maybe making sure we have more champions in our region is something that helps us increase that footprint. Some of the Chambers, the North West Yorkshire has recently done some trade missions, and it's something I think we can build on further. So absolutely. Barney.
Yeah, I mean, Tom mentioned there about the culture difference between public and private sector. Actually, between different size organisations, I think that is even bigger. And I think what's quite important within this is to understand for a lot of businesses, the way they're going to engage won't necessarily be by looking into big strategies and high level things. But so the skill has got to be how you're going to take little grievances, little problems, little anecdotes or stories or what's bothering them, and adapting that and turning that into the bigger, higher level policies. Because I think that's the only way you're going to get a lot of people to engage. And if you don't, and Sarah's nodding, because I know we've had this sort of conversation before, so it's I'm not saying something I don't think you're going to do, but I think it's maybe worth actually somewhere recognising that how smaller businesses are going to engage in this won't be by talking about big strategies. Actually, they're going to be talking about their day-to-day problems.
That's a really good point, Barney, and thank you. And Sarah, I know you're looking at that, aren't you, already? Thank you.
I mean, one of the key sectors here is manufacturing, and this One Voice, which is a conglomerate, as I said, of lots of key stakeholders in the manufacturing space. Particularly the manufacturing alliances are coming together, and hopefully they can feed into that, and that sort of does capture quite a lot of small businesses.
Absolutely. And just on of yourselves and the Chambers and CBI around how we do that actually, and how we get that real life insight from a broader range of businesses. Then absolutely.
Thank you. Annette.
Thank you. So I think part of this as well is looking at the pipeline. So this is talking about organisations that are already existing, but what are we going to do for people in the region who want better for themselves and who have large ambitions and don't really know what that process is. So it's a lot around creating a process for people who want to start businesses, making it really simple for them to access finance and support, and communicating that widely. That was one point. And then the other point was around skills. So there are skills that we could provide and kind of upskill people in now. But I think we really have an opportunity to be very forward-facing and future-facing and be on the front foot, because things like coding and stuff like that, for instance, are being phased out. So how do we look at the future, identify those skills and skill people up now, or start that pipeline now?
Thank you. Sarah, would you like to come back on that?
I think our skills piece, Michelle. Sorry.
I forgot you were there, Michelle. Sorry. Yeah.
I mean, that's a really important point, and it's something that will feature in all of our planning. And I think one of the things that you'll see when we come to talking about the local growth plan is that this kind of tension of how you upskill ahead of demand, even when you know it's emerging demand that's coming, is a really, really difficult issue. And it's difficult for the education and training landscape as well to prepare themselves for demand that's coming around the corner. So that is a system-wide issue. That is something that it's exactly a space that we need to be in. So I'm really glad to hear you mention that. Thank you.
I think that also plays into our cluster work. So understanding the horizon scanning for clusters and the skills that they're going to need, and especially for the niches in those clusters which may well be disruptive, getting to know them better and the way we align ourselves around that work will absolutely underpin exactly what you're saying, how we become more future forward and opportunistic rather than always running to catch up. So I think that's a really strong point. And on that note, Sharon.
Yeah, I just want to add on to your point on skills. Before we need skills, we need a culture that is going to look for the skills, and we need opportunity or a vehicle to deliver innovation where we'll need new skills. So I feel like we may have to invest a bit on regional leadership and creating that sort of innovation culture. Coming from my background, I think talking about new technology like digital transformation and AI and new things. So we need to start doing that. One thing I want to mention is, the events that we have recently hosted. It was great, absolutely amazing, but they all were paid, which means there are some small businesses and medium businesses who may have missed out on some opportunities. So how do we sort of solve that problem of, having these events? It's great, but how do we make it more accessible for everyone? And one observation there is 2 days event, absolutely amazing. A lot of things happen, but then what happens after that for 12 months? So how do we sort of break that down and give a 12-month support afterwards to these businesses who may have missed this? So that's my thought.
Thanks, Sharon. And I guess it plays into that pipeline thing. Is how do we create those corridors and pipelines of opportunity or support to make sure we're not a flash in the pan? Felix, on that.
I'm going to try to answer that now, but just on the access that small businesses should have to some of these networks and events. For Climb, we heavily subsidised tickets for several businesses from West Yorkshire to attend. I think most of them ended up paying just £50 or something like that. So this is the first time we've done that. It went down well with them. Obviously, we were reviewing that to see what impact it made, what difference it made to these businesses. Was it useful or not? But also, it wasn't simply us providing a subsidy. We actually brought these businesses together and supported them so they were ready to pitch to these investors. So we had several sessions with them to make sure they were ready. They had their pitch deck and all of that, and they knew what to expect and how to interact with investors. As we said, we are now in the review stage, looking at how effective all of that was, what we should do next time. So we are alive to that. The second bit that you raised, Sharon, really crucial around the importance of networks and access to these networks. It's a key point that kept coming through UK Reef, but especially at Climb. And it's a key part of what we're setting out in the local growth plan when Sarah was talking about us being enablers in the system. Really, that's just policy jargon for us working alongside businesses to make sure they've got the support they need, they've access to the information and all other types of support they need to be able to grow. So we take that on board. And most of the time, 95% of these networks will be free to attend. They're just groups of people. We probably, if we're supporting, just putting on some drinks or whatever, just to make sure the opportunity is there for people to meet up and to have those conversations. But that's a key part of our role, so we take that seriously.
Could you remind me, did we support members who went to UK Reef with packs and information and so on?
We did. Mm-hmm. Everyone in our delegate park, whether anyone we had invited or was speaking or was in our groups that were coming with us, had a delegate pack, had access to all the collateral that we had, and we kept in touch with them. And as I said, this is part of the review. We're going to go back and see how effective that was and what else we have to do. So everybody had a pack. We had a session before UK Reef, went through the whole agenda, went through our pitch, made sure everybody had a sense of why we were there, what we were looking for out of it, had conversations with the speakers, we invited all of that. But we're going to review that to see whether we did it right or not, and what else we had to do. But yes, we did that.
I just wonder if there's an opportunity, because I know UK Reef gave free tickets to young people who are interested in business and entrepreneurship, whether we could pick up those young people and, introduce them to opportunities, whether that's the West Yorkshire Enterprise Programme or something, they've done a good thing, but let's not let these enthusiastic young people slip through our fingers, maybe.
Okay.
Thanks both, Ben.
Thank you, Andy. Just to build on Felix's point about to answer to Sharon's question about how do you make sure that we go see a lot of interesting things at a conference like Climb and they don't see them through. Felix and I might have made a series of commitments to the organisers around
identifying some of the challenges that we identified, particularly around the kind of ethnic minority founder and business-led access to things like networks, support systems and finance. You know, there are some startling stats that we talked about to climb around just how those rates drop off and they're not where they should be, particularly when intersectionality is taken into account. We committed that we were going to look at that. We'll come to it when Felix talks about and some of the work on the local growth programme, but we will go back next year and talk about how we fared and whether we've seen any outcomes. So we do want to use these things to both to talk about the challenges that we face in trying to improve outcomes, but also about what works as well.
Thanks, Ben. We're doing a tag team on the button, yeah. Use your own side. So, any other comments? Becky?
Thanks very much for this. It's really interesting, especially what everybody said. I really agree on the comment about industrial strategy. Obviously, that might be something that we'll be adding to this, especially if there's a change of government. Couple of questions. Deep dive on how we maximise retention of money in the region. What do you mean by money? Is it business rates or is it apprenticeship levy funds, stuff like that, or is it just spend? And do we know how much money is leaving the region in that sense? And if so, where's it going? And would there be any prioritisation when it comes to the investment zones? Obviously, there's 3. And you know, is that things that the business community can help with as well? And obviously, I've shared with you our cluster playbook. Very happy to share it more widely if that will be of interest.
Thanks, Becky. And I know the cluster playbook has informed some of the work that we've done already, so it's great, and I really enjoyed having a look through it. Felix, would you like to come back on this?
Sarah's poised.
Sarah's poised. So
I'm only poised because that was one of your points to put in the PowerPoint. So
yeah.
I think the money thing was your thing, Mandy.
So my view on money is that it's not quantified yet, but I'm very keen that we spend a lot of time attracting more money to this region rather than working out how we spend what we've got. So obviously we need to support programmes and we need to spend money. There's a huge poverty in this region that we're trying to address. We're trying to drive up economic prosperity, but by attracting money here, then we've got more money to spend. And whether that is through inward investment, whether it's through lobbying with government, whether it's through the devolution that Tracy has, however we do it, that needs to be something that we concentrate on, and that's my first thing that I concentrate on. So that's what I mean. It's a broad brush sort of approach, but it's a start, and I think that when money is tight, making sure we capture as much of what is available as possible it is really important. To give an example, the European, and I'm going to use space because it's a cluster that I've worked with, but the European Space Agency is paid into by the British government, but often because of what happened with Brexit, companies don't believe that they can win funding from that agency. We've had, I think, about £4 million into Filtronic through that programme and a number of other successful stories. And we've run recently an event, this is Space Up Yorkshire, so it was in York, Councillor Douglas, but at the Guildhall, which was fantastic, about helping businesses across Yorkshire win funding from that organisation. That's money that's already available, but we just need to point it at our businesses. And by no mistake, this is not space business, this is business using frontier technology, which encompasses an awful lot of businesses that sit across Yorkshire and especially West Yorkshire. So that's what I mean by it. I can't articulate it any better than that yet because it's the start of a piece of work, but that's where I think we should definitely be focusing. So I hope everybody agrees.
May I?
Yeah.
And just regarding the investment zones as well, we're in a bit of a unique position that a snap general election was called mid-financial year. So there are things that weren't signed off before the election was called. So we are hoping to we will be continuing. There are the things that we've laid out in the investment zones are things we want to do. So we will be really focused on an incoming government about continuing that work. But just to say, at the moment it has gone a little bit quiet, but it's inevitable given the sort of funding timelines and so on. But rest assured, we're not going to let that deter us.
And so you bring me to a neat. Oh, go on, James, and then I'll do mine.
Sorry, man. It was really encouraging, Mayor Tracy, to hear you mention David Skaith in your opening comments. I do believe that having 4 metro mayors in Yorkshire makes Yorkshire a really powerful brand, but also a place to work, invest, live, etc. As we know, businesses don't recognise political boundaries, but I think that collaboration and that working piece is really nuanced and powerful. So if you think of the sort of in-between towns like Harrogate that are bang in between, you know, Leeds and Bradford, etc., and it's great to see Councillor Douglas here today. I think this is something that we'd probably all be encouraged to support and be aware of going forward. So we might talk about West Yorkshire, and David, of course, will talk about York and North Yorkshire, but businesses will just go where the money is and will go where the opportunities are. So I think there's another opportunity. It was great to see you both speaking at UK Reef with that dovetailing about place first. Just happens that you may be of a red persuasion, but I think it's place first, isn't it? And I think this mustn't be underestimated for the business community as well, that will really just see, you know, West and North Yorkshire working together, South Yorkshire, and then of course the East Riding. So it's just an observation which I think is really useful for businesses as well in the region.
Thank you. And can I say that you can also be helpful, because there may be businesses in West Yorkshire that David nor I know that they've got a second office in Harrogate or, you know, wherever, that you could alert us to those opportunities to work collectively together. And I am hoping that on trade missions and so on, that we can also widen it out to a Yorkshire offer, because these borders are increasingly porous, aren't they? However, Yorkshire is such a powerful brand. I think to identify ourselves as Yorkshire, and then, you know, the parts of Yorkshire, together we are definitely greater than the sum of our parts.
Thank you very much. I'm going to move us now, if there's no more comments, on to item number 9, which is the state of the West Yorkshire economy. And I think that's over to you, Patrick.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. This paper and series of slides is designed to give you an up-to-date sort of picture of where we are in the national and local economy, and also as well just to reflect on some of the key economic messages coming out of the recently published State of the Region report. So I'm going to talk briefly through some of the summary insights. Then my colleague Peter Glover is going to quickly run through some of the key messages from the State of the Region report. So just to reflect on where we are with inflation, the headline rate of inflation is now 2.3%. That's in the April figure, having fallen from 3.2% in March. Significant decline in the headline rate, driven in the main by a sharp contraction in the price of electricity, gas and other fuels, with a bit of upward sort of inflationary pressure from forecourt motor fuels. More details on that are in your slide pack at page 30. The bank rate, as you're probably all aware, was held at 5.25% by the MPC in May. Pretty clear with a lot of the information that was produced to support that, particularly their monetary policy report that provides the evidence for their decision making, that they do see the rate falling somewhere near the 2% target by the second quarter, but they do expect second round inflationary sort of forces to play out towards the back end of this year. So they are expecting inflation to sort of peak a little bit towards the back end of 2024. So a mini sort of roller coaster ride in terms of inflation. But I think the clear view is the fundamentals are there, that they're expecting inflation to fall below the 2% rate by early 2025. And that's consistent with the messaging from the bank. They've been very consistent on that, and indeed with the Office for Budget Responsibility as well. To reflect on where we are with the UK economy, UK economic output rose by 0.6% in the first quarter of 2024. In contrast to its performance in the last quarter of 2023, where it contracted by 0.3%, so a significant rebound in activity. Again, more detail on that is contained in the pack, particularly at pages 32. What's driving that is an upturn in output in the service and production sectors, and particularly within the production sectors, manufacturing growth. So manufacturing in the first quarter of 24 rebounded and grew by 1.4%, so particularly strong growth, and that was fairly broad based across most of the subsectors in manufacturing. It's worth also reflecting on where we are internationally. That sort of 0.6% growth in the first quarter places us up towards the top of the league table for the G7. So only Canada matched the UK's growth rate in the first quarter of 2024. Moving on to the next slide, just briefly reflecting on some of the key local insights. I mentioned there that obviously the Bank of England are particularly focused on state of the labour market, and obviously the intention of monetary policy, where inflation is rising, is to try and loosen the labour market, particularly around those inflationary pressures. And we are seeing that effect starting to take hold, and that is priced into the work that the Bank of England have been doing. But employment growth has started to stall. So the headline number of people in employment has fallen by 4,000 recently from its peak. Pay levels are starting to stabilise. Claimant unemployment is rising steadily, but very slowly. Vacancies have fallen back. But it's probably worth reflecting on the fact that the number of vacancies, whilst they've fallen off, still higher than we have currently, than we had before we went into the health crisis. So we've still got a fairly active labour market, but it is clear that the local labour market, along with the national labour market, is beginning to soften. And in terms of sort of local insights from businesses, we get a lot of our insights from the Chamber's quarterly economic survey, and that is pointing to a strengthening in demand prospects amongst local businesses. So the kind of messages we're seeing in the national data were very much echoed in the first quarter QES survey, where that showed that many businesses had seen both domestic and international orders on balance rising much more strongly compared to Q3. And also when you reflect on the next 3 months going forward, many of the businesses in the survey are also telling us that they're expecting to be, their employment expectations are more positive than they were towards the back end of 2023. It's also worth just highlighting as well that we were also currently in field for the annual West Yorkshire Business Survey. So that's the primary means by which we provide information to the business board about what businesses are thinking, and that survey is currently underway at the moment, and so it's worth flagging that to the attention of board members. So those are probably the key headlines. We're obviously happy to answer any detail on that, and I'll hand over to Peter now, who'll just briefly talk through some of the key economic messages from the recently published State of the Region. Thank you.
Thanks, Patrick. So just by way of introduction, the combined authorities developed a basket of indicators to monitor progress against the missions contained in the West Yorkshire Plan. And performance against these indicators is presented in the State of the Region report. So what we've done in the pack is drawn out a selection of indicators that are most relevant to the business board. So I'll provide a brief overview of some of the key messages from that. First of all, a positive message around economic growth. So the region's performance and economic growth for the period to 2017 to 2022, West Yorkshire outperformed the UK picture with a GVA growth rate of 9% versus the UK average of 5%. So very positive, and that's contributes to an improvement in West Yorkshire's performance on GVA per head, and that's a central measure of local prosperity, and it shows a narrowing of the gap with the UK average. But we shouldn't overstate that. There is still a continuing 16% gap in GVA per head, so that's more than £5,000 per person in absolute terms. And even if the sort of improved respective GVA growth rates that I mentioned previously could be sustained, it would take until 2044 to close this gap in GVA per head. In terms of productivity, we only have figures up to 2021 for regional productivity for GVA per hour worked, and these indicate that the West Yorkshire's relative position actually got slightly worse during the pandemic, even though the region's GVA grew strongly. And this is due to a big reduction in hours worked at UK level. So that's really reflecting the ongoing impact of the pandemic in the data. I think the main message is that West Yorkshire's long-term structural underperformance on productivity, with a gap of 14% or £5.30 in output per hour worked. So quite a significant gap. In terms of the business base, we do have some positive messages there. So West Yorkshire has been performing strongly in terms of the growth of its business base in recent years. So we've seen a net increase of 4.6% between 2017 and 2023, and that compares with the UK average of 2.2%. But we still have a large structural gap. So the region has 18,000 fewer businesses than it should have based on its population. And it's also worth noting that there was a decline in the business count between 2022 and 2023 in West Yorkshire, with Leeds worst affected. But West Yorkshire still saw a smaller decline than the UK average, so that sort of relatively positive performance was still maintained. Turning to exports of goods, we have some new figures for 2022, and they show that exports of goods grew positively by 18% between 2021 and 2022, which is much higher than the UK rate of growth of 6%. So that takes the value of goods exports to 11% above their pre-pandemic position. You should note, though, that none of these figures are adjusted for inflation. There's been a big shift to non-EU markets in West Yorkshire, so exports to those markets grew by 33% between 2019 and 2022, whereas EU exports fell by 5% over the same period, and that reflects export growth focused on the USA plus India, Turkey and Brazil in West Yorkshire. Turning to the final area that we want to focus on around innovation, new figures have been released from the UK Innovation Survey, and they show that West Yorkshire's performance in terms of the proportion of firms that are innovation active is fairly moderate at 40%. It's above the national average of 37%, but below a range of other areas in the southeast and southwest, but also sort of key comparators like Greater Manchester. To accompany these survey figures, we've also included analysis of R&D investment, and that's perhaps a more concrete indicator than the survey data, although the figures are dated, and they show that West Yorkshire underperforms quite markedly on this type of investment when you take into account the size of its economy, particularly on public R&D investment. So just to illustrate that, if West Yorkshire's public investment in R&D as a share of GVA could be raised to that of South Yorkshire, it will more than double from 280 million to 620 million per annum. So what we're saying is South Yorkshire, a near neighbour, is performing a lot better in terms of that public investment in R&D. So that's it. I'll hand back to you, Chair. Thank you.
Thanks very much. So I guess for the board, it's to note the contents of that, but to have any questions. So Martin.
Exporting. You knew I was going to put it on this, Peter. That just doesn't match up with what we're seeing. We saw that exports are still far below the levels pre-budget when they dropped about 15% overnight. We're currently seeing a real stall because of the Red Sea issues. So the exports from this region have, at one stage, they were looking like they were going to be about half what they were previously. And we do punch above our weight with exporting, especially manufactured goods, as you're saying, rather than the services. It just seems that that's so different from what we see. I just wonder where the data come from. It doesn't match, I'm afraid.
So the data we use is the HMRC data, which is now published down to sub-regional level. So we've checked the data, so it is accurate based on what they provided. I just wonder whether there's sort of certain factors within it, as there often can be with exports, and maybe distorting the picture from what you're seeing.
Yeah, sorry, Shab, I'm interested. So if it's 2022, it could, if the accounts are filed, it could be referring to things that happened pre-Brexit, in effect, rather than year, because of when you file the accounts, because 2022 accounts are just in the deadline. I don't know, but it just seems so different from what we see on a day-to-day basis, and we work just ourselves with 400 exporters on a daily basis, and James, you'll have many more than that, I think, in Leeds. So.
I think this is often the problem with lag metrics, which is what we're working on, especially with regional metrics from HMRC. They're so late in terms of the time lag that it's very difficult to compare our view now to what it was. However, that's good. That's interesting. Your take on that, Martin. James.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thanks Patrick and Peter for that. And it was good to hear you mention the quarterly economic survey as a piece of, as a bellwether of looking forward. So you're right, with lag metrics and data, we're looking back. The quarterly economic survey is for all of us in this room. Yes, it's conducted by Martin's colleagues and ours, but you know, whether it's FSB members, CBI members, this is a piece of research that is taking a pressure check of businesses right now, but also looking forward and also looking back. The quarterly word gives it away, looking back and looking forward. And it's a plea for help. The data that Patrick and Peter use, which is then used by the banks, the Bank of England, the Treasury, is only as good as the number that we're representing. So how we communicate, and probably we'll come on to this as a business group later on, is that flash mob approach. It's going out for a week, we're doing the field work, can you please fill it in? Are you exporting more or less than you were in Q4 of 2023? Are you looking to hire more? Are you looking to invest more? Where are you investing? What are the challenges? What are the problems? What are the opportunities? So it's a bit of a plea. So to enable Patrick and Peter to have that up-to-date data, which can either correlate or contradict Martin's and Becky's and all of ours, including colleagues from the FSB, it would just be how we get better at doing that. I don't know the answer, but there must be a way, because that will be really rich data for this board to go, we're flatlining, we're going up, which is great, which we can then tell the world, or we're going down and we can address that internally.
Councillor Patient. I'm not used to calling people via proper titles, so I have to sort of get back
Honestly,
into that.
Scott's absolutely fine.
Yeah, thanks, Scott.
Yeah, it was just a brief one, and it was just around. Now, I appreciate it might not be my target audience, but if some inclusive economy stats might be useful. So thinking about things like poverty levels and disposable household income, just so that cross-sector we can do a bit of that drill down on what some of the wider factors and interventions we might want to make would be.
Thank you, that's a good comment. Patrick, I think you wanted to come back.
Yeah, just echo those comments from James. So thank you. The QES is a key survey for us, and we do support that. So that working relationship with QES and that survey is quite important to us. It was just to pick up on the point that sort of Martin made on the export side. It's probably worth reflecting. I think Peter referred to the fact that the data is not adjusted for inflation. So that figure is based on the value of exports. So you need to take into account the fact it's probably capturing increasing factory gate prices to a number of markets. So what we need to do is, and we can do this, we can apply a deflator to it just to give a more rounded picture. But that's probably the main thing that's at work there. Yeah.
I think it might also be worth considering the change in ownership of businesses and where headquarters of businesses are now located. So during the post-pandemic era, there's a lot of M&A going on, mergers and acquisitions going on. So headquarters are being moved potentially out of our region, where larger businesses are snapping up smaller businesses, of which we know we have a lot. So I don't know whether we picked that up at all, but I think it's certainly something that's worth a bit of a deep dive on to see how that is affecting our data and if it has any shift in terms of changing the sort of dynamics of that. I also think we should consider what our lead metrics are. So we obviously need lag metrics because we're looking at economic prosperity, but what are our lead metrics that we measure ourselves on, and how can we measure that we're doing better on those, not just on what's gone past? How do we look at what we're doing right to make sure that the lag metrics then become more positive? It's a difficult ship to move, but if we do some right things and measure those, then we will eventually get that improvement, I'm sure. I don't know the answer. Any other, Tracy?
A lot of what I was going to say was actually sort of covered by James, really, about the timelines of the data. The one thing I would like to pick up on is this 18,000 fewer businesses in West Yorkshire. Where did that sort of figure come from? And then secondly, what can we do to support that sort of catch-up process?
Peter?
Thank you. So, yeah, the 18,000 figure, that is calculated by looking at the number of businesses per head of population, comparing that in West Yorkshire with the UK average, and looking at the difference. So we've got, in terms of enterprises, we have 80,000 enterprises in West Yorkshire. So that gives you some context to how big the deficit is. So it is quite significant.
And Sarah?
just going to say, in terms of what we do about it, the conversation about the local growth plan and what we do around kind of stimulating that enterprise culture, getting more businesses starting up across diverse groups and supporting them through is part of that, collectively what we can do.
And I think that brings us neatly onto the next section on our agenda. So I think from that we know we need to increase the number of businesses, we need to increase productivity, we need to work out how we export more, and we need to be mindful about how we measure it. So on that note, how are we going to grow West Yorkshire? What's our local growth plan looking like? So at the last meeting of the business board, we discussed some of the evidence emerging around the challenges and opportunities for West Yorkshire, and that work is now underway at pace. And looking at the bold actions we need to make to shift the dial, address the challenges, and maximise the opportunities we have in West Yorkshire. So I'd like to ask Joe Barham to give us an update. And we'd really welcome input from you on the content of this slides, because we'll be turning this into a full narrative to go to the Combined Authority in July. So please speak up.
Thanks, Mandy. Thanks, everyone. So really keen to hear from members of the board on the slide pack that was circulated. So I'll just give a really brief overview of the context of this work and then open up to comments from you all. So as Mandy said, we have been working on this for some time now. We discussed the evidence base that underpins these slides at the last meeting, looking at the challenges that we have, as been touched on, around productivity, on skills and investments, and what that means for living standards across the region. So since then we've had the local election, so we are now really focused on delivering that mayoral pledge for a local growth plan and how we interpret that. So the slide on screen is slide 52 in the packs. So it's worth saying that this is still very much being driven by the vision and missions of the West Yorkshire Plan and those core principles around equity, diversity and inclusion. So we've touched a little bit already on what that means for some of our priorities here, but also sustainability, thinking about our net zero target for 2038, and also health and well-being and the role that has on the economy and productivity in particular. So if we could move on to the next slide, please. So this is slide 53 in the packs, and it sets out a high-level overview of the plan and how we're structuring our approach to it. So there's three main parts to this. So we've got those core principles, as I just mentioned, right at the top, and the idea is they'll cut across everything that we do and all of our actions and priorities. But the first section that we cover is our offer to businesses, communities and people of West Yorkshire. And this touches on four broad areas of activity. So we've got skills there, and our role in the system for skills. And again, we've touched on sort of what that means, and we've got further conversations about our role in the system, but really bringing that together. And we've talked a lot about childcare as we've been developing this plan. And it is an issue that actually cuts across lots of elements, but does particularly come out in the skills section, particularly on where we can act to support childcare in the region, which is so important, not just in terms of labour force participation, but also enabling children from all backgrounds to get the best start in life with access to high quality early years provision. So looking at what we might be able to do to support the sector there. The next section we've got is on the business ecosystem. So obviously we've talked a lot about that with this group. Could we just jump 2 slides on, please, Peter? Just to bring this slide up. So this sets out our approach to the system. Again, picking up on some of the comments we've already had at the board today. So looking at both where we have high growth opportunities and those specialisms within particular clusters, but also more widely how we support all businesses across the economy, looking at the foundational economy as well, and how we structure our approach to that. And again, that point around access to support those networks and how we reach those wider networks to make sure that all businesses can benefit from support that's needed, really key part of this. We also touch on, or another aspect of the offer to business communities and people is connectivity and mobility. So really looking at those major transformational opportunities that we have in the region on mass transit and bus reform and what that means across all areas of the economy. So thinking about skills, the supply chain, as well as the improved connectivity and the links there to productivity. And then we've got an area looking at our strategic sites. This was featured heavily at UK Reef and harnessing those opportunities, but then also looking at what all of this means for housing as we seek to realise the ambitions of growth in this plan. The second part of the plan, if we could just move on, please, Peter, on to, sorry, 2 more slides on. Yeah, thank you. Sets out our offer to investors. We know, we've touched on this a little bit, there's definitely more to do in this area, on the plan in particular, but so important that we can really clearly articulate the offer that we have to investors and how we're going to go about closing that investment gap that we know we have in West Yorkshire, which is really closely linked to our challenge around productivity. And the final part of the plan is setting out our relationship with government. So obviously we'll have more to say about that post the election at the start of July. So across this piece of work, there's more to do. We're continuing to engage with partners to get feedback to help shape this. We are looking at bringing together some numbers to quantify some elements of this. So we've talked about some of those gaps already on productivity, what that means in terms of the number of businesses that we need, the number of jobs. But what we also want to do is articulate the numbers on some of the opportunities we've actually identified in the plan and how they would go towards closing those gaps that we know we have. You'll notice there's nothing reflecting sort of local authority, local priorities specifically in this pack. We are working really closely with the local authorities on this and how we articulate their priorities and their local plans and bringing that together. So that's a work in progress, but we will in the next iteration reflect those local priorities and how they interact with the regional framework that we've set out here. Just briefly to touch on some of the feedback we've had from other stakeholders. So we know that there's more to bring out here on the role of health in the economy. We've got it as a principle, but we need to articulate a bit more clearly how that's going to work in this plan. Feedback on need to do more about the rural economy. Again, it's touched on briefly, but need to bring that out in a bit more detail. Something that's been brought up at this meeting, but the relationship with the other mayors, how can we articulate that opportunity and how we'll work with the metro mayors and international opportunities and really picking out some of those global opportunities and articulating the offer there. So as Mandy said, the next steps are to continue to work on this framework, but then develop that into a narrative, bring out the detail of this, which we'll take to the CA in July, and then hopefully have a launch event sometime in the autumn. So I'll pause there to open up to it.
So I'd like to open the floor to any points. Susan.
Hi, thank you very much for that. So on the transport element of it, I understand obviously the transport you put in there is the stuff we have direct control over, but of course we've got the £10 billion going to TRU at the moment, and then Bradford on the TPE line, etc. And whilst that's not completely within we're not delivering that ourselves, it is very much part of our offer to investors, I would have thought. So how is that sort of fashioned? Thank you.
Would you like to go back on that, Jo?
Yeah, it's a really good point, and I think something that we need to clearly articulate those wider opportunities that we have in this plan, so we can make sure that's definitely reflected as we're going to develop.
Barney.
Yeah, just, I mean, I'm just looking at slide, is it 85, page 5, the monitoring indicators. Some of this stuff, I mean, it's really hard. I'm not sure how you can, I'm not sure you have control over some of these things. Like, I'm not sure over things like child poverty, how much West Yorkshire has control of that and how much is to do with government and the UK as a whole, or things like reduction in neighbourhood crime, which, you know, if you look across the country, it goes up fairly consistently across all communities. So I'm not quite sure how you're going to know you're doing this, whether you have the right levers to do some of this. But I don't want to start saying don't do it because they're all good things to do. But I'm just thinking in my head, are you sure you can do this? Are you being too ambitious? Are you sure these are things you've really got proper control over? And I suppose another thing is, you're not doing this on your own either, because South Yorkshire will be doing similar things, Greater Manchester will be doing similar things. So are you competing? Are you working with them? Are we sure which way we're doing? So I'm sort of just spewing out things that are coming up my head as I'm thinking, but these are just things that, you know, we've been sitting around tables saying we want to do for years and years and years. I think you need to convince me that you actually have the means to do this, because I don't think we do, if I'm honest.
And this is where the revolution is, Barney. Devolution. We have much more control over what we're doing. So take, for example, policing and crime, to your point. When I came in as mayor, I was focused on the safety of women and girls. And we have had a laser-like focus on that. And we have metrics that we can show the interventions that we have made are making a difference, notwithstanding the rising levels of, I was about to say contentment, but that's not right, but with confidence from the public in policing, particularly around their investigation of domestic violence, for example. We will definitely have that data, and we will also have more of the tools in order to have that direction of travel, but also tools and more money to be able to team and ladle, rather than be in these silos with government that these are expected metrics and outcomes. We can definitely do more that will suit our economy. So when you're talking about child poverty, for example, being able to widen the eligibility for free learning to level 3 to not just the minimum wage, which is the statutory expectation, but the real living wage has meant 7,000 more people have had access to skills and learning, which means they can then get jobs with greater skills and are better paid. So that is just one tiny example of the levers that we have in our in devolution in our organisation, and this sets out how we're going to grow the economy. And honestly, if you don't have faith in devolution now, we're all sunk, because we cannot continue how we are, what we've done in the past, because the gap is ever widening between the south and the north. Devolution is the solution to that frustration that nothing changes.
If I can just come back very quickly, I think devolution is really important and will do a lot of good, but I don't think it alone can do some of these things. These are huge things, and it's different using the resources we have through devolution to target certain things, to reducing overall offending rates, which there's huge societal, it's not just about the police there, it's about all sorts of reasons why we have offenders. So I'm not saying, this is why I'm sort of mulling over my own head. It's not about saying this. I mean, these are all good things, but do we honestly believe in 5 years' time, or well, no, sorry, it's 2040, we'll actually be able to do these? And if there's any of this, we think actually there's bigger things involved here, then I think we should be honest, because that's how we use our laser-like ability to focus on the things we can change, because that's what we've got to be here for. It's about change, not ambition. It's actually making lives better.
Absolutely, I could not agree more with your last point. But for example, to have said, after COVID and with rising inflation and economic Liz Truss tanking the economy, for us to say 3 years ago, we're going to deliver 5,000 affordable homes, what we did is we delivered more homes than since the economic crash. It is about leadership, Barney, and it is about determination to deliver. The public have put me in this place in order to deliver on these, on better outcomes. We are not going to sit on our hands and just say, well, it isn't down to us, it's down to the wider economy. Devolution is the lever with which we are going to control these metrics. We're going to make West Yorkshire brighter, more prosperous, a happier place, and we can definitely do that by the things that we're undertaking over the next few years. But I think Felix wanted to come in and also, sorry, I'm not chairing, I'm team chair.
That's a nice position
Apologies
to be in, isn't it?
Apologies, everybody.
So first of all, thanks, Barney, for creating such a drive in the room. It's fantastic. And I know one of the things that you're really supportive of is the Fair Work Charter. And that Fair Work Charter is one of the things that we can do within business, which is what this room is about, to actually start to promote change in our region that can help start to drive change in some of those issues, even if it's only a small part of the answer. I've got Felix to come to and then Susan, because it's all going off here. It's great. Come on, Felix.
Thank you. I think a lot of what you're saying is absolutely spot on, but yeah, I challenge the team to be ambitious, and I would rather we were accused of being too ambitious than not being ambitious enough. So I absolutely take that challenge, and I'm happy for us to be ambitious. I think, though, what we're seeing here are the metrics for the West Yorkshire plan. the missions, the 5 missions in the West Yorkshire Plan, which sets out a whole raft of things and which are not about only what the combined authority within its relatively narrower remit is able to control. We are setting out what needs doing given what the evidence says, not simply what we on our own are able to do with our resources. It's a cast around to say this is what the evidence is saying, this is what needs to change for the missions to be delivered, to be achieved. And some of that will be within the ambit of the local growth plan we are delivering. Some of that will fall in the local transport plan, in the climate plan, and others that we're working on. Some of that will live with other partners that we work with. And within as Joe was saying, which is my other point, we've structured the local growth plan. The third part of that is our ask of central government, our ask of other partners. And we'll capture that. The things that are not within our remit will be captured there. So we hold those conversations and we push others to do their bit so that what we're doing is able to complement that, to take us a bit closer. So your point is absolutely spot on. We accept that it is ambitious. Some of it might not even be realistic for some, but I would rather we were ambitious because we have been unambitious for too long.
And it's important in this point that we lead the thinking to enable the delivery. Wherever that delivery comes from, we need to be pushing the boundaries to improve these things because they're so important. I'm going to come to Susan and then to Ben. Okay, Felix did it. So Susan, then to Tom, and then to Sharon. Susan.
Well, you're all right. Because actually, the thing is, if we don't own these stats of West Yorkshire, who is going to champion West Yorkshire if it's not us to shape the place that we try and govern? And long gone are the days, actually, about 30, 40 years ago, politicians used to control absolutely a lot of the institutions that we now talk about. We don't. Now politicians are very much shapers, influencers, trying to get other agencies to act in a way that's going to be complementary to everything else. And therefore we've got used to being in a different space now as politicians, really, which is not just pressing a lever and it works. It's actually speaking to somebody who has a lever to make them press it in a different way to make sure it works better. So to give an example, like in education in Bradford, like 32 out of 34 secondary schools are managed by private academy trusts, not by the local authority. So therefore, I have to meet with the chairs of those to say, look, could you do things like this instead of like this? And try and bring them round table. So as a convener, and West Yorkshire is absolutely the regional convener of all these people. And Tracy as mayor has a very strong convening power to bring some of these people around the table to say, actually, this is not working for us. So I think it's important. I absolutely agree, Barney. You're absolutely right. We control all these things. But for politicians, having it on the list sort of demonstrates to me, well, actually, I need to go and speak to these people because it is going to influence what we achieve at the end of the day. So for that reason, I think it's the right scope. But we have to be honest with ourselves about what is in scope, which levers we pull, and which are the levers other people pull. And therefore, we've got to make allies and friends outside this room to make sure we can pull more levers collectively.
Great point, Susan. Tom.
I feel like I have closed the circle at this point because I remember in 1999 being in a meeting and Graham Hall, who was the chair of the RDA, was sat in Tracy's seat, unelected, and the great Ian Greenwood was sat in Barney's seat, and Ian could not. Graham was putting this. We were gonna hit the moon. We were going to be ambitious. We were going to change things. And Ian couldn't stop himself coming in. He kept asking, but Graham, what's going to happen when we fail to hit a target? And Graham kept saying, we're not going to fail. We're not going to fail, Ian. And Ian just kept winding him up. And I guess that's the central sort of, that balance between ambition and, stretching ourselves, but also bringing people with us to show that there's realism and there's reality, and we're actually, we've got plans behind this is where you want to get to. And I do think Tracy's got it right in terms of that balance of the value base and the way we're going to work, I think, has got to be glass half full. It's got to be. We've suffered in the past as a region, I think, for being seen too much to be complaining that it's someone else's fault rather than us getting hold of it. And it's one thing about Leeds that I've loved while I've been here and that I'll miss is very much that can-do spirit and that enterprising spirit. And so I absolutely think that you've got the tone right, but I do think there's a trick to play to meet Barney's point, and Barney's will be speaking for a lot of businesses out there who'll be more sceptical, who won't know what we're doing and everything, so he's right to raise it. And as Susan says, I think finding those bits of real action where you can show that here's what we're actually doing on this thing, and even though we might not be able to change the way that interest rates are set across the country, this is going to make a real difference. I think that's the bit we've got to get to next, and I'm really confident and optimistic that we can. And I think especially the shift of tone to local growth plans, I think is a really good move as well, and I think there'll be more to come there. So yeah, it's a great debate and it'll go on, I'm sure, but we've got the tone right.
And Barney, I love you. We're family.
I was going to say we're definitely going to miss Tom's experience and a thought as well. Sharon, you are next, and then Martin.
Yes, thank you, Mandy. This is absolutely beautiful. I love the mission, and I can see how 17 SDG goals have been embedded in there, so that's very clever as well. One thing I just want to probably pick up on Barney's point is, how do we sort of circle this? And this is all interconnected as well, just like SDG goals. One, it's a suggestion, just from my side. Faith plays a key role in bringing morality and making everyone aware of in terms of what to do, especially what are the right things to do, especially in situations like in mission number 5. So I would like to see if faith could probably become one of the catalysts in terms of solving some of those problems, where we can have more moral awareness, if at all. If we can't do that, I think the other option is we need to know our SDGs, what they are, how it impacts others, how as an individual, as a business leader, or as an institute, we are responsible for putting some moral values and sort of democratizing that. So how can we sort of bring that and link with Mission 5 at some point? So maybe that's a food for thought.
Food for thought, Sharon, but can you just tell me what an SDG is? Because I
Social.
I don't know what that is.
So United Nations has 17 SDG goals, which is yeah, SDG goals. So I can see that's been embedded here, and we want to make sure.
Sustainable Development Goals. You're talking about the 17 on the colour chart with and, absolutely.
I can see probably the mission number 5 is more about the morals and the awareness of what is the right thing to do, and how we can bring that awareness quite early, especially at school level, college level, or at the community level, or organisation, NGO level. So just a food for thought.
It's a great idea, and I know in some businesses, mine included, we use the Sustainable Development Goals to measure our progress against them, because I think they can transfer through everything that we do. So definitely food for thought, Sharon. Thank you. Martin.
Thank you. Firstly, I think it's very good. Overall, I agree with the missions of things. That's how you do it, Barney. Support.
There's always one sellout.
I've mentioned this before, and I don't quite know how we get to the end of this, but it assumes that the productivity downfall is all in the private sector, when in fact we know we need to find some way of talking at how we can make the public sector more productive because of how many people are employed in it. And if we could make a difference there, especially how our public sector works together in a region. And with that in mind, I think social value, the new social value rules on procurement and how we use that could be a real game changer that we can control locally, that would have a massive impact on the economy. there's a really good, the best policy I've seen, I'm sure others have got them, at Wakefield Council have got a really good social value section in their procurement strategy, so it might be worth having a look.
Thank you, Martin. That's really helpful. Annette?
I love the missions. I love the ambition. I think it speaks to who we are as a region. We always kind of reach for the stars, and if we don't reach for the stars, then, you know, it's better to aim high and not quite make it than aim low and then just not get anywhere. So I think, like, looking at them, I'm glad that we're using them as monitoring indicators, because it's important to monitor the data and to keep track of, you know, what levers make what things move. I'm kind of struck at the interdependency of it all. Some of the healthy life expectancy or healthy outcomes will impact living standards, child poverty, you know. So I think as we make changes and move forward, it will be important to keep an eye on all of these, keep an eye on the data, so that we can see what small changes actually affect other missions, and keep an eye on the interdependency, interlocking of it all, interconnectedness, that's the word, of it all.
And I think, if I may, the mission-led approach, which as an organisation we're now adopting, that it's not just I only do transport, because, for example, being able, through the apprenticeship levy share scheme, to train 15 PCSOs to go on the bus network and in bus stations to keep people safe and then confident about using the bus. That sort of Venn diagram, the creativity there to solve problems when you've got the right people round the table. So it's getting out of our own silos to tackle those 5 missions, where you can bring people in from all different parts of the teams. And I think it's also interesting for colleagues, so you get better, faster outcomes that are maybe more sustainable as well.
People are holistic, right?
Thanks. For my last point, I'm going to come to Cully and then we'll move on.
Just a couple of things. I do think, and you'd probably expect me to say this, having come from the cultural sector, that a vision of a future is really important, and therefore a collective sense of where we're trying to head, and the mechanisms of getting there are really important. So the ambition feels really powerful to me, and the convening power of us all to affect the interconnectivity of what makes a better place to live is really powerful, and I think that's we should all be proud of that, and the document really enhances that. I got a couple of questions around high growth clusters and the fact that, you know, the creative industries don't appear there, and yet, I mean, I know it's talked about, but there is a really important to sort of centre that more obviously, because it still remains one of the fastest growing sectors, and even in the most recent assessments, I think it's had growth in terms of the economy. So I wonder if there is a way of talking about the creative industries, especially in the light of the cultural strategy and the kind of passion that the Mayor has had for that, and the regional impact in recent years of the work that's happening here and the retention of talent that's happening here. And that's also linked to the sort of skills question earlier, which is that I am really, really concerned about the demise of the creative education, the lack of the arts, and the drop in engagement from young people in those areas, because the creative imagination is where innovation sits, and it affects every aspect of our business operations. So I think there's something collectively we need to do around the policy drivers going forward, which really invests in young people and their ability to access the arts and their own creativity in some way, and education has to play an important part in that. So I think some of that just feels like we should hold on to that quite tightly, because that's the bedrock of future generation and their skills needs.
Cully, I think you're right, and how we tell the stories around where we're targeting. So whereas the creative sector might be coming out in emerging tech, for example, we need to tell stories around what are our niches and what are our big ambitions as well, and the creative sector is certainly one of those. With Bradford coming up, we've just had Leeds. Yeah, it's absolutely through what we do, and I think we need to make sure that, and our universities, for example, which are also huge strengths of the region, come out more loudly and proudly within that plan, along with that international piece. Tracy, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, Collie, obviously I'm in lockstep with what you're saying, but it is in the emerging tech cluster in creative and also media. But we can't lose sight of it because it is actually a growing sector. 3 times as many jobs in the creative industries than the rest of the country. That investment and that focus does deliver. But to your point about young people, absolutely. We've lost art teachers, we've lost dance teachers, drama fallen off a cliff. It isn't right that only middle class kids have access to the creative subjects. To Barney's point, that is not in my gift as a national policy, but what we can do, for example, the Mayor's Screen Diversity Programme, we're continuing that for another year. The outcomes have been incredible. The Young Poet Laureate, where every school in West Yorkshire has had a poetry module, and we commissioned our young poets to do more of that. That's now being taken up as a national scheme because it was so effective. We can do things on the ground, but absolutely, with potentially a change of government, there might be a new approach, because businesses are telling me time and again they need staff who can collaborate, creative problem solve, which is why we have the West Yorkshire Promise as my manifesto. Every young person will have a package of soft skills, a programme, a module of soft skills. And also every child will have access to, as I mentioned, grassroots sports and creativity. So we're on it, but Barney is right that there's lots of these things that are centralised, but we can also be cheeky and innovative, and we can do more with the money that we have.
Thank you. So lots to think about there, Joe. I hope you're taking notes. And I guess at that point we'll move on, because we're coming to the end of the time we've allocated for this, to item 11, which is around the Combined Authority as a systems enabler. So I guess how we're going to start to do some of this. And Felix, over to you.
Thank you. We've set out 3 reviews, really, and I think after this session there's a workshop for which begins to pick some of them up, and hopefully some of you will be able to stay for that. The 3 reviews are: 1, looking at employment and skills, and that is in 2 phases. Michelle can go into some of the detail there, but you have seen in your slides in 2 phases. 1, looking at how the Combined Authority and our local authority partners in particular work together more seamlessly to ensure that our shared ambitions are delivered more efficiently, more effectively. Our local authority partners have really close and strong partnerships, relationships, capacity to deliver and to act locally. A lot of the skills and employment space is also quite hyper-local in nature, and recognizing what that is and how we can work together so that we as a Combined Authority are enabling, are supporting, and are working as well as we possibly can is really crucial. And then understanding what is truly regional in nature and the role that the Combined Authority also plays, and understanding that within this system there are other important players, our colleges, skills providers, etc., our employers, and how that ecosystem works. So the first review is to really help us understand that. The second one is around business support and business engagement. And again, I can go into a bit more detail if board members would like that, but that is really helping us understand what the landscape is like, really picking up on what Ben was saying earlier on, messages that came back strongly from Climb and from UK Reef about the access that parts of our business community feel they have or they lack when it comes to the networks out there, the support that is out there, and what they can tap into, where the gates are, what the barriers are, etc. We know that the Combined Authority with partners, we put out a fair bit of business support, but we're not the only ones. that do this. Partners around the room do that. I was on a call yesterday, and we were talking about how much they use the library, Leeds Library, and the IPC there, for example. There are others providing support out there. What is our role as a combined authority? How do we make sure that the way we act does not duplicate, but we add value, and we are supportive as we possibly could be, especially in an era where resources are more and more limited. That also allows us to think more closely, going back to one of the illustrations that Joe used around the wheel of enterprise, as Mandy calls them, how we can then devote ourselves to building where they don't exist, helping to build the networks and the cobweb of support that businesses need. The third one really goes to a point that Councillor Hinchcliffe was, I think, making earlier on. We've engaged our university partners through YPERN to help us think through the agency that the combined authority has. We're limiting this for now to the work that we're doing in the growth plan, so it's looking at skills and business and the economy. But it's helping us to understand how the system is laid out, what the key levers are, and what happens when we pull one lever and not the other, and what the consequences are in other parts of the system, helping us to understand our role as a convener, as an enabler a bit more, because we are going to have to play that role more skillfully in this period we are entering into, when, as I said earlier on, resources may not be coming to us in the same way as they did in the past, but we have increased powers, responsibility, some funding. But we know that there's a lot more funding out in the system that sits outside of us and our public sector partners. How do we work as a system partner, a system leader, to actually move the dial significantly? Going back to the point Barney was making, you'll see in the past when we do a lot of business support, a lot of the metrics that we would use will be how many businesses we've spoken to, or how many hours we've engaged with business. And we've done this for decades. The dial is not shifted. So we're trying to look at the system and what moves will actually shift the dial at that level. And so what is our responsibility? What is the responsibility of our partners? So through YPERN, our university partners are grappling with this with us, because this is quite difficult. It's quite, it's not easy to put your finger on. But hopefully some of that learning will underpin the work that we're doing in the local growth plan, and will inform how we act. So those three pieces of work have been kicked off. There are lots of conversations going around. If somebody's not knocked on your door yet, it won't be long. Somebody will. We're just trying to pick all the brains that we can to help inform the work we're doing. But hopefully that all of that is helpful. Thank you.
Thanks, Felix. Has anybody got any comments or questions? Natalie?
There we go. Felix, just on that, the business eco support system. We've spoken about lag metrics, and I don't even know what year they relate to, but 80,000 businesses we have in West Yorkshire, 18,000 fewer, yet in 2022 we had nearly 2.5 million people. So part of what we saw at the end of 2008 and the global recession was a resistance and a risk aversion to entrepreneurship. We've had the pandemic and everything else which has gone with it, but surely we're now, as we start to see the economic climate soften, which it should, start to be able to reach out to the startups, to the scale-ups. And I know you spoke about the packs and how you can support new businesses, but some of the things which already exist, and I guess it's about how do we join it up across to West Yorkshire to drive it forward. You've got Eagle Labs, the NatWest Accelerator, the university incubators. How do we encourage younger entrepreneurs to take that step to give us more business? And I think that's going to be part of quite a focused, targeted plan, because you can track them. You can go, okay, we've supported 10 businesses from the NatWest Accelerate. I think they've put through across the UK about 2,500 companies a year. Goldman Sachs, you know, there are various programs which are active here, but how can we show we've supported them, we've opened various doors, and then champion the success? So it's a bit like, you know, we say, well, there's some stars and we want to reach for the moon, but actually we're probably talking about Mars now, coming to your space. But how do we give them that support and identify them and track them and champion? And I think that is how we can really change the dial, because ultimately with the business board, we need more businesses, we need more entrepreneurs. We need to see that growth, and to have those stats of 18,000 fewer businesses. We're back to 2008, but we're now, nearly 4 years past the pandemic. We must be coming into a different type of landscape. Well, I think everybody's done with everything which has happened. So how do we then move it forward in a focused way where we can support some of those great ideas, those great individuals to really champion West Yorkshire?
So Felix, I'd like to come back, and so you saw earlier like a spoke system with some access twos on there, and
Yes.
really, Felix has just alluded to the Wheels of Enterprise, which is not a name I'm necessarily wedded to, and a lot of you will have heard me bang on about this. But basically, whether you're a startup, a scale-up, a large business, or investing in the region as a business, the things you need is access to somewhere to be, access to finance, access to skills and know-how, to your point about incubators, access to markets, so where you're going to get your business from, access to promotions, so how do we talk and stand loud and proud about your business or what we're doing in the region, and then finally access to innovation. And underneath each of those wheels, what I would like us to see us do is to start to colour those in with what have we got as solutions, either that we are providing, that our partners are providing, or that is provided elsewhere. So Eagle Labs is a great example of something that can help solve that. Within the West Yorkshire Innovation Network, we have solutions to that. And so it's starting to unpick all of that, and then how do we signpost better to it? Oh no, Barney.
I actually think you're lacking ambition again. I was smirking to myself because, Felix, you said you're not the only ones who provide support. The majority of business support is provided by businesses to businesses. It might be accountants, people doing marketing, websites, etc. Yada, 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 yada. So whenever we talk about business support, we start talking about the state-funded business support. That's a fraction of all the stuff out there. So why do we limit ourselves? And so I think the challenge, if you look at the business support ecosystem in West Yorkshire, all the support's there, and we have businesses and people wanting to start businesses. The key is how do we bring the two together? And essential and crucial to that is actually allowing businesses and business owners to know what it is they need rather than what they think they need, which means you need some sort of process that really shows them what's possible, some sort of diagnostic tool. And the worst thing that is always done by local authorities and the combined authority is they get funding, they fund people to come in to do a service, they deliver the service, put people out of business, then at the end of the funding they go away and they leave the ecosystem weaker than when they started. And actually in the voluntary sector this is actually frowned upon, but in the business sector we put up with it for some reason. So I actually think our starting point isn't, where we're starting here, if I may, challenge again, but it's actually about saying, how do we link up the existing support to the people who need support, and how do we close the gap, whether that's by knowing what's available and signposting, or by providing funded support that goes to existing support providers rather than the cavalry that we bring in. And if we start with that, it'd be such a better way to go about it. And it's not revolutionary because the voluntary sector has done this for years.
I'm going to come to Felix, but I couldn't agree with you more vehemently. But putting it into some sort of structure and making sure we bring in everything that there is, not just anything that we provide. No, it's simple. Being in business myself, I completely understand that. It's the same for a lot of people around this table. Finding the labyrinth in the first place is hard enough, let alone finding your way around it. So having some organisation around that and making sure we pull in everything we can, that point about attracting money to the region and creating networks is absolutely essential, and that has to be where we put a lot of our focus in this room. So Felix, I'll come to you next.
Thank you. Councillor Hinchcliffe. You will find that on this we are as aligned as possible. And that is why, Sarah is smiling, that is why we put this review in place. Because it's absolutely essential that whatever results we've got, we only deploy to add value. It does not make sense for us. I think Helen, my colleague, explained it quite cleverly to me recently around sort of turning up and putting a big canopy or tent up, and then by the time you take it back down, all the grass is withered underneath it. So we turn up and we do all this stuff, and then the funding runs out and we leave. And as you said, the ecosystem is then suffers. There is a role that the combined authority has to play. Organizations like us have to play and should play that deliberately with intent. But that role is not to duplicate what already is out there, is to add value to what is out there. And that is what we're seeking to put our finger on. So we absolutely acknowledge the work that you and others do. As I was saying when I was speaking earlier on, we know businesses tell us when they need support, they go to their accountant or their lawyer or one of the few last places they'll come to is us. We're not precious about that. The important thing is when we need to know what it is that we are the best ones to deliver, and then we get out and we do that. And we support you and others to do what you are the best, well placed to do. Sometimes the best thing we can do is to get out of your way. And we need to do that, and we need to just do that.
Thanks. I've got 3 comments. So Councillor Hinchcliffe, then Tom, and then Ben. And then unless there's anybody who's absolutely desperate to speak, we'll start to draw it to a close. So Councillor Hinchcliffe.
I'm pleased that we're having these reviews. I just wondered if obviously the timescale seems quite short as well, which I like. I like getting answered quickly. That's good. But I just wondered, have you got terms of reference and who's going to be involved in these reviews? I couldn't see anything. Perhaps I missed it. But obviously the question you're asking is important, really, in terms of where you're going to get to. And obviously we've got some, on business, we've got a very good voice around this table, of course, but on things like skills, of course, local authorities need to be very much part of that. So have you got that sorted yet, really, that nuts and bolts bit? Thank you.
Yes, we do. We worked very closely with local authority, DODs, I'm talking local authority language here, but local authority partners and others to draw up a spec. We've gone out, and so we've got partners in who are working with us on it. We've got Shared Intelligence working with us on the skills one. We've got GC Insights. Richard is there, and he's ready to talk to colleagues straight after this. And then we've got the universities working with us on the third one that I talked about. And they are coming out to speak with all of you about this. So as I said, if nobody's knocked on your door yet, somebody will soon.
Thanks, Councillor Hinchcliffe. Tom.
Thanks. I'm sorry, I'm in reflective mode. But I was the future once. As someone once said, I think this is one area where we've got better over the years. I know I go on and bang on about the RDA, but we're actually better. The CA's done a good job on this agenda, and I think it's been partly because it's more focused. And I think again that point about recognising up front in the way we communicate this and the way that we talk about it, that it is the private sector that takes, most of the strain on this agenda, and business to business is what people generally respect more, in my experience. But actually there is a gap, there's market failure, and often in specialism, and that's where the clusters come in, and when you can get that really good support from the state more generally. So yeah, I just encourage us to continue with that, what Felix has described really, that we intervene where it's really needed, but not try and step into the space that is better for the private sector to just take itself and continue with.
Thank you, Tom. And Ben?
Thank you, Chair. One of the other things, we did quite a lot of work in the transition between the LET board and this board to make sure that we had the right people around the table and the right processes. One of the things that fed back during that time was that we have sessions like this and we listen to Barney's comments and we all say that's what we're going to do, and then there's silence, and then what pops out the other end is a carefully crafted combined authority programme that looks a lot like the thing we said we weren't going to do in the first place. We absolutely commit to not doing that, and we really do want you to hold us to account to make sure the moment you see anything like that cropping up in any of this work, call it out and we'll deal with it. So we genuinely, Felix's point is absolutely right, we genuinely want to have a different role in the ecosystem and certainly not leave any network destabilised or weakened as a result of anything we're doing in the public sector.
Thank you. Don't turn it off. So unless anybody's absolutely desperate to say anything, I'm going to draw the meeting to a close. The date of the next meeting, I think, is probably as a placeholder in your diaries, but will be agreed at the Combined Authority meeting, which I think is next week, isn't it? So I hope you've all found this useful. It's been fantastic to have all your insights and inputs, and as Ben so eloquently put, it's really important that we feed that in and that you make sure that you start to see your fingerprints on behalf of all businesses in West Yorkshire across everything that we do. So thanks for everything, and please stay now. We've got a workshop which is going to be really interesting on some of the insights around the reviews, and we'd love you to be part of that too. So we've got a bit of time. It's time to grab a coffee. Before we leave, from my point of view, I'd just like to say thank you to Tom. You've been a brilliant friend and ally to many people around this table. You've been brilliant today in the meeting. I'd love you to come more often as the voice of reason. But whatever you do, we wish you every success, and thank you for everything that you've done for the region to now.
Yeah. Yeah. If I may just add, there are biscuits that reception went out to get for us, so it would be remiss if nobody had a biscuit, so help us out.
And they're not cheap ones.